The frozen blood on his son's torn jacket told Officer Daniel Hayes everything and nothing. 3 days, 72 hours since 8-year-old Josh vanished into the wilderness. The K-9 units whimpered, backing away from the forest's edge like they'd hit an invisible wall. Even Rex, the decorated German shepherd who'd tracked serial killers through Detroit's worst neighborhoods, trembled and refused to advance. "Sir, the storm's coming," Sergeant Mills radioed. "We need to pull back." Daniel hurled the radio against a pine tree, the crack echoing through the white void. That's when he saw her, a young woman emerging from the tree line like a ghost, wrapped in worn furs. Beside her walked something impossible, a massive gray wolf with amber eyes that seemed to glow against the snow. She spoke in barely a whisper, but her words cut through the howling wind. "My wolf can find your son." Then she dropped something at Daniel's feet, Josh's other shoe, still warm. "Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story." 4 days earlier, Daniel Hayes had arrived in Mountain's Edge 6 months ago, certain that policing this backwater town would be a cakewalk compared to Detroit's murder capital. The locals, with their mountain folklore and wolf legends, were quaint. He'd thought, primitive. "Officer Hayes," the white-haired mayor had warned his first week, "respect the old ways here. The forest has rules. The forest has trees, Mr. Mayor." Daniel had cut him off. "I have badges, guns, and K-9 units. That's all the rules I need." The kidnapping happened Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. Josh had been walking home from school when the black SUV pulled up. By the time Mrs. Patterson called it in, they were already gone. But Daniel knew exactly who'd taken his son. Marcus Volkov, the Russian mobster Daniel had arrested 2 weeks prior for running drugs through the mountain passes. The arrest had been textbook surveillance, warrant, perp walk past the local news cameras. Daniel's big city methods had worked perfectly. The ransom call came at sunset. "Your modern methods humiliated me. Officer Hayes, let's see them save your boy. You have 5 days. Then the forest keeps him." Day 1 of the search. She'd appeared at the command post Kaylin, the strange girl who lived on the mountain's edge, barely 20, wild-haired, with that enormous gray wolf that followed her like a shadow. "I can help," she'd said quietly. "Zephyr knows every path, every me." "Security," Daniel had barked. "Get this girl and her circus animal out of here. This is a crime scene, not a petting zoo." The townspeople had exchanged glances. Old Mr. Chen had muttered, "You're making a mistake. Her grandfather was what, another mountain mystic?" Daniel had sneered. "I don't need folklore. I need real police work." Kaylin hadn't argued. She'd simply looked at him with those unsettling green eyes and said, "The forest remembers everything. Officer Hayes, every kindness, every cruelty." Then she'd vanished back into the tree line with her wolf, leaving only tracks in the snow. Now, 3 days later, Daniel understood what she'd meant. The forest did remember. It remembered how to hide his son from every modern method he'd trusted. The radio crackled with Marcus Volkov's voice. "Time's running out, officer." Tick-tock. Hour 73, present. The warm shoe in the snow shattered Daniel's last wall of pride. His knees buckled, hitting the frozen ground hard. The great Detroit detective, the man who'd solved 37 homicides, was reduced to begging a girl he'd mocked. "Please." His voice cracked, raw from 3 days of screaming Josh's name into the unforgiving wilderness. "I'm sorry for what I said. For everything. Just please help my son." Kaylin studied him, her young face carved from stillness itself. Zephyr, the massive gray wolf, circled them slowly, his amber eyes never leaving Daniel's trembling form. "You'll follow," she said finally. "You won't question. You'll trust. Can you do that?" "Officer Hayes." "Yes. Anything." She nodded once, then turned to Sergeant Mills and the remaining search team. You can't come. Your radios. Your noise, they'll scare away what needs to be heard. Mills stepped forward. Ma'am, protocol states. Protocol. Kalen's green eyes flashed. Your protocol has failed for 3 days. Go back. Tell the town that Officer Hayes is with me now. Daniel stood, legs shaking. Mills, do as she says. But sir. That's an order. As the search team retreated, Kalen knelt beside Zephyr, whispering in a language Daniel didn't recognize. The wolf's ears twitched, and suddenly the forest itself seemed to lean in, listening. You should know who you're following, she said, not looking at him. 10 years ago, your predecessor, Chief Morrison, helped Compass Mining Company seize this land. My grandfather, Joseph Windwalker, was the last of the indigenous trackers who protected these mountains for 8 generations. He died trying to save the wolf pack from the company's trappers. Daniel's throat tightened. He'd heard whispers of the scandal, but never the details. The town council voted to support the miners. Kalen continued. Said grandfather's ways were backward, that progress couldn't be stopped. They drove us off our land. I was 10 years old, watching my grandfather bleed out in the snow, surrounded by the wolves he'd died protecting. She stood, and Zephyr moved beside her. This wolf Zephyr is the son of the white wolf who found me that night. She brought me food all winter, taught me to survive when humans wouldn't. His bloodline has protected these mountains for 300 years. He's not my pet, Officer Hayes. He's my brother. I didn't know. No, you didn't ask. She started walking toward the tree line. Come, we're going where your machines can't follow. They plunged into the forest, leaving the marked trails behind. Within minutes, they crossed into what locals called the Dead Zone, a section of wilderness where compasses spun wildly and electronic devices failed. Daniel watched his GPS flicker and die. His radio produced only static. Even his digital watch stopped at 11:47. Why does everything fail here? He asked, then caught himself. Sorry, you said not to question. Old magnetic deposits in the mountain. Kalen answered anyway. Or so your scientists say. My grandfather knew the truth. This is where the mountain's heart beats strongest. Your machines can't hear it, but Zephyr can. The wolf led them through paths Daniel couldn't see between trees that looked impassable, over ridges that seemed to appear from nowhere. The snow grew deeper, untouched by any human footprint. 3 miles in, Zephyr suddenly stopped, nose to the ground. He'd found something beneath a fallen log, Josh's torn backpack, the Batman one Daniel had bought him for his birthday. He's been leaving markers, Kalen said, examining broken twigs arranged in a pattern. These are the old signs my grandfather taught them at the town heritage festival last summer. Your son, he paid attention when the other children laughed. Daniel's eyes burned with unshed tears. Josh had always been different, quieter, more observant than other kids. They pressed deeper. The forest grew denser, older. These were trees that had never seen an axe, paths that existed on no map. Zephyr led them to a small clearing where the snow was disturbed, showing signs of a struggle. Kalen knelt, touching a dark stain on a rock. Blood, but not Josh's. Someone else was hurt here. Volkov's men. She shook her head, frowning. No, this blood is familiar. That's when they heard it, a low growl from the shadows. Not from Zephyr, who'd gone rigid beside Kalen. More wolves emerged from the darkness. 6, 7, 8 of them, all with the same amber eyes. The pack, Kalen whispered. They've been following us. Is that good? She didn't answer. Instead, she approached the alpha, and scarred female with white streaks in her gray fur. The wolf sniffed Kalen's hand, then turned toward the deeper forest, whining. What's wrong? Daniel asked. Kalen's face had gone pale. They're not just tracking Josh. They're tracking someone else, someone who shouldn't be here. She looked at Daniel with sudden fear. This isn't just about your son or Volkov's revenge. She picked up something from the snow, a piece of torn fabric. her grandfather's ceremonial sash, the one that had disappeared with his body 10 years ago. "This is a trap," she whispered, "and it was set for me." Hour 75, deep forest. The Devil's Throat ravine yawned before them like a wound in the earth 50 feet across, 200 feet deep, its bottom lost in shadow and mist. In summer, experienced climbers with full gear sometimes attempted it. In winter, it was suicide. Daniel stared at the impossible gap, his heart sinking. "We have to go around." "A round adds 8 hours, Kaylin said, studying the ravine's edge. "Josh doesn't have 8 hours in this cold." She stepped to the very brink, where ancient symbols were carved into a standing stone. Her fingers traced the weathered marks as she whispered, "Grandfather, if you're listening." Then she whistled not a normal sound, but something that seemed to come from the earth itself, rising and falling in patterns that made Daniel's ears ache. The forest fell silent. Even the wind stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground trembled. Across the ravine, a massive pine tree that had been leaning precariously suddenly shifted. Daniel watched in stunned disbelief as the 100-foot giant fell with deliberate precision, its trunk landing perfectly across the chasm, branches interlocking with trees on their side to create a natural bridge. That's impossible," Daniel breathed. "Trees don't just—" "It's been waiting," Kaylin said simply. "Grandfather marked it 40 years ago, knowing someday it would be needed. The roots have been growing toward this moment." She stepped onto the massive trunk without hesitation. Zephyr followed, his paws finding purchase on the bark as if he'd crossed 1,000 times. Daniel forced himself to follow, trying not to look down at the dizzying drop below. Halfway across, Kaylin stopped. She knelt, examining something on the bark. "Your son came this way. Look." Carved into the wood with a pocket knife were the initials J.H. and an arrow pointing forward. "Brave kid," Kaylin murmured. "He knew we'd follow." Once across, the wolf pack materialized from the shadows, not just the 8 from before, but dozens now. They moved like smoke through the trees, silent and purposeful. Daniel realized they'd probably been there all along, invisible until Kaylin wanted them seen. "This many wolves," Daniel started. "Every pack in the territory," Kaylin confirmed. "They remember my grandfather. They remember the debt." The tracks in the snow became clearer, here heavy boots. 3 sets, 1 set dragged occasionally, suggesting injury or exhaustion. Next to them, smaller prints. Josh's. Kaylin knelt again, placing her palm flat against a tree trunk. Her eyes closed, and she remained perfectly still for 30 seconds. When she opened them, there was something different in her gaze, older, wilder. "The trees remember them passing 6 hours ago," she said. "Your son was walking on his own, but he's weak. They've been feeding him, but not enough. The trees remember." "How can trees?" She touched a broken branch. "Everything that lives holds memory. Officer Hayes, every ring in a trunk records a year. Every scar marks an event. The forest is one giant living memory, if you know how to read it." She moved to a patch of disturbed snow, touched a small bloodstain there. Her expression shifted to something like pride. "Your son fought here," she said. "Bit one of them hard enough to draw blood. But look." She pointed to the pattern of twigs around the blood. "He's been leaving me messages. These arrangements. They're from the Heritage Festival. I was teaching the children the old warning signs." Daniel remembered that day vaguely. He'd been working, had dropped Josh off for an hour while he handled paperwork. Josh had come home excited about the wolf girl who could talk to trees. "What's this one mean?" "Bad men with thunder sticks," Kaylin translated. "Guns. He's warning us they're armed." She looked up at the canopy. "And this one, eyes in the trees. They have cameras." As if on cue, a red light blinked from a tree 20 feet ahead, then another, and another. A speaker crackled to life. hidden somewhere in the branches. Marcus Volkov's accented voice filled the forest, distorted but recognizable. Well, well, Officer Hayes brought the witch girl, just as predicted. Hello, Kaylin Windwalker. Kaylin stood slowly, her hand moving to Zephyr's neck. Did you really think this was just about the good officer's son? Volkov continued, his laugh echoing unnaturally through multiple speakers. Your grandfather hid something from my father 20 years ago. Documents, evidence. Before he died, my father told me only a Windwalker could find them. Only someone with the old knowledge. I don't know what you're talking about, Kaylin said to the trees. No, then let me refresh your memory. Your grandfather helped 12 families escape my father's trafficking ring, hid them in these mountains. The FBI could never find them, but they testified anyway. My father died in prison because of Joseph Windwalker. Daniel looked at Kaylin with new understanding. This wasn't random. Volkov had planned this, using Josh as bait not just for Daniel, but for her. The boy is leverage for his father, Volkov's voice continued. But you, little wolf girl, you're the real prize. You're going to walk into that mine ahead and find what your grandfather hid. Then you're going to bring it to me. And if I refuse, a child's scream echoed through the speakers. Josh! Daniel lunged forward, but Kaylin caught his arm with surprising strength. That was recorded, my Sehun, she said quietly. Listen to the echo pattern. He's playing us sounds from hours ago. Another speaker crackled. Smart girl. Yes, that was from earlier. But would you like to hear what I can do live? Come to the mine entrance in 1 hour, both of you. Or I start removing the boy's fingers. 1 for every 10 minutes you're late. The speakers went dead. Daniel's hands shook with rage. We go, Kaylin said, but she was looking at Zephyr. The wolf's amber eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. But not alone, and not as prey. She raised her head and howled, not an imitation, but something that came from deep in her chest. Primal and powerful. The wolf pack answered, their voices creating a symphony that made the mountain itself seem to shiver. When the howling stopped, Kaylin smiled the first time Daniel had seen her do so. It was not a comforting expression. Volkov thinks he's the hunter here, she said. He's about to learn what it means to be hunted by the mountain itself. She pulled something from her pouch, a small whistle made of bone, carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the dying light. My grandfather's calling whistle, she said. The one he used to summon help in the darkest times. She blew it, but no sound emerged that Daniel could hear. Zephyr's ears flattened. Every wolf in sight suddenly looked toward the deeper forest. Something was coming. Something big. A shadow moved between the distant trees, massive, impossible. Not a wolf. Something else. Something that should not exist. What did you just call? Daniel whispered. Kaylin's green eyes reflected the fading light like a cat's. The real guardian of these mountains. The one even Volkov's father feared. The ground trembled slightly, rhythmically. Footsteps, coming closer. We should run, Daniel said. No, Kaylin said softly. We should pray it remembers I'm a Windwalker. Hour 76, the Sacred Grove. The shadow between the trees revealed itself slowly, not the monster Daniel had feared, but something more unsettling. An ancient grizzly bear, white with age, its eyes clouded by cataracts. It stood 12 feet tall on its hind legs, scarred from 100 battles, yet it moved toward Kaylin with impossible gentleness. Grandfather Bear, she whispered, extending her hand. The massive creature sniffed her palm, then settled back onto all fours with a rumble that shook snow from the branches. It turned those blind eyes toward Daniel, nostrils flaring. He remembers your scent, Kaylin said. From the town, from your fear. But he also smells Josh on you. The innocence. It's why he came. The bear turned and began walking deeper into the forest. They followed, the wolf pack flanking them like an honor guard. After 20 minutes of silent travel, they arrived at a grove unlike anything Daniel had seen, a perfect circle of ancient pines surrounding a standing stone carved with symbols that seemed to predate any culture he knew. "The Crying Stone," Kaylin said. "This is where my grandfather taught me everything, where he died, and where he was reborn into the mountain's memory." The bear settled near the stone, clearly standing guard. Kaylin approached the monument, running her fingers along the carved surface. Water trickled from a crack in the stone, despite the freezing temperature, the source of its name. "We rest here," she announced. 15 minutes. The animals need water, and you need to understand what we're really walking into." Daniel collapsed against a tree, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. 3 days without real sleep, running on adrenaline and desperation. His hands shook as he pulled out Josh's photo from his wallet, the one from last Christmas. His son grinning in front of the tree. "Tell me about Josh's mother," Kaylin said suddenly, settling across from him. Zephyr lay beside her, his massive head in her lap. The question caught Daniel off guard. She died 2 years ago." "How?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Cancer. 3 months from diagnosis to—" He couldn't finish. Josh was 6. Old enough to understand, too young to process it. He stopped talking for 4 months. "Is that why you really left Detroit?" Daniel nodded, unable to meet her eyes. Everything there reminded us of her. The apartment, the parks, even the precinct where she'd bring Josh to visit me. I thought starting fresh in a small town would help. Thought I could protect him better here. "Instead, you brought danger with you," Kaylin said, but her tone held no judgment. "The mountain tests everyone who comes here. It's not cruel, it's honest." "I've been so arrogant," Daniel admitted. "Thinking my city methods, my technology, made me superior to everyone here. I mocked traditions I didn't understand, dismissed wisdom because it didn't come with a badge." Kaylin pulled something from her pack, dried meat and berries. She offered half to Daniel. "My grandfather used to say, 'The mountain doesn't care about your credentials, only your character.'" As they ate, Zephyr suddenly stood and trotted to Daniel's side. The wolf sniffed him thoroughly, then did something extraordinary. He lay down with his head on Daniel's knee, a gesture of acceptance that made Kaylin's eyes widen. "He's never done that with an outsider," she said softly. "Never." "Why now?" "Because he sees what I'm beginning to see. You're not here as a cop. You're here as a father. The pack understands that. Family protecting family, it's the oldest law." Daniel's hand trembled as he touched Zephyr's fur, feeling the powerful life beneath. The wolf's breathing was steady, trusting. "I need to tell you something," Kaylin said, her voice dropping. "About the night my grandfather died." She pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly looking like the 10-year-old girl she'd been. The mining company had hired trappers to clear the wolves. They were using poison bait, steel traps. Grandfather found out and tried to stop them. But Marcus Volkov's father, Victor, was funding the whole operation. He needed the land cleared for his drug routes. Daniel's blood chilled. The Volkovs were involved even then. Victor Volkov was the shadow behind everything corrupt in these mountains. My grandfather had gathered evidence documents, photos, recordings. He hid them somewhere in the old copper mine before Victor's men caught him. She paused, stroking Zephyr's fur. They tortured him for 3 days, trying to get the location. He never broke. On the 3rd night, they brought him to this grove to kill him, thinking the sacred place would break his spirit. Instead, the wolves came. Hundreds of them. The white wolf, Zephyr's mother, she tried to save him, but there were too many guns. Tears ran silently down her cheeks. I found him here at dawn, surrounded by dead wolves, their bodies shielding his. He was still breathing, barely. His last words were, "The mountain remembers, little one. When the time comes, it will show you the way." The white wolf was wounded but alive. She could have fled, but she stayed with me all winter. She brought me food, taught me to hunt, to read the forest signs. The pack became my family. The mountain became my home. Daniel understood now. This wasn't just about Josh or revenge. This was about a decade-old wound finally being forced open. But here's what Volkov doesn't know, Kaylin continued, a slight smile crossing her face. Grandfather didn't just hide evidence. He hid something else. Something Viktor Volkov was desperately seeking before he died in prison. What? The real ownership documents for this entire mountain range, dating back to the original indigenous treaty, never legally dissolved. If found and validated, they would void every mining claim, every development permit, every... She stopped, head snapping up. The wolves had all risen, ears forward, focused on something beyond the grove. Kaylin moved to where Josh's trail continued, examining the marks he'd left. Her face went pale. "No," she whispered. "No. No. No." "What is it?" She held up a piece of cloth Josh had deliberately snagged on a branch. It was from his jacket, but something was drawn on it with mud, a crude map. "He's not just leaving markers, though," she said, voice shaking. "He's been listening to Volkov's men talking. He knows about the documents, and he's trying to find them himself." Daniel grabbed her shoulders. "That's good, right, if Josh finds them first." "You don't understand." Kaylin's composure finally cracked. "The mine isn't just abandoned, it's trapped. Grandfather made sure of that. He set it up so only someone with Windwalker blood could navigate safely. Anyone else who tries." She trailed off, staring at the map Josh had drawn. At the bottom, in a child's shaky handwriting, were the words, "I can help. I remember the festival. I know the signs." "He's trying to be brave," Daniel said, his heart breaking. "He's going to die," Kaylin said flatly. "The first trap will kill him. Unless..." Zephyr suddenly howled, not the gathering call from before, but something urgent, panicked. The pack responded with a cacophony that made the trees shake. From the distance, carried on the wind, came the sound of an explosion. Kaylin's face went white as death. "The mine. Someone triggered the entrance seal." She sprang to her feet, running before Daniel could react, but her words carried back on the wind, turning his blood to ice. "That was meant to kill me." Hour 78, approaching the mine. They ran through the forest like wild things, Kaylin leading with inhuman grace while Daniel struggled to keep pace. The explosion's echo had faded, but smoke rose above the tree line ahead, black and oily against the white sky. The abandoned copper mine came into view, and Daniel's heart sank. What should have been a derelict entrance was now a military installation. Floodlights blazed despite the daylight. Razor wire coiled across every approach. Motion sensors blinked red at strategic points. Armed men in tactical gear patrolled with rifles equipped with night vision scopes. "Stop!" Kaylin hissed, pulling Daniel behind a massive boulder 50 yards from the perimeter. The mine entrance itself was partially collapsed from the explosion, but a secondary entrance remained open, heavily fortified with sandbags and what looked like a mounted machine gun position. "How many?" Daniel whispered, his cop instincts cataloging threats. 8 visible, maybe more inside. Kaylin's eyes tracked things Daniel couldn't see. But look, the explosion was at the old entrance, the one Grandfather sealed. Through the smoke, Daniel could see a smaller hole blown in the hillside, away from the main operation. Debris scattered around it suggested someone had tried to create their own way in. "Josh?" Daniel's heart hammered. "No. Volkov's men. They tried to bypass the main entrance, probably looking for another way to the documents." She pointed to a body near the destroyed entrance, tactical gear, but unmoving. Grandfather's first trap. Hydrogen sulfide pockets. One spark and... A speaker crackled to life, mounted on a pole near the wire. "Dramatic entrance. Miss Windwalker." Volkov's voice boomed across the snow. "Though I expected you sooner. Your concern for the boy must not be as great as advertised." Daniel started forward, but Kalen caught his arm. I know you're watching, both of you, Volkov continued. Here's what's going to happen. The girl comes in alone. She guides my men to the documents. Once I have them, the boy goes free. Simple transaction. You're lying, Daniel shouted at the speakers. Am I? Let's ask Josh. A different speaker activated, and Josh's voice came through, weak but alive. Dad, I'm okay. I'm in a cage, but I'm okay. There's water dripping, and the feed cut off. Touching, Volkov said. Now, Miss Windwalker, you have 5 minutes to show yourself at the gate. Alone. Or I start with his thumbs. Children's bones break so easily. The speakers went dead. Daniel turned to Kalen. We can't let you go in there alone. There has to be another way. This was always about me, Kalen said quietly. Josh was just bait. You were just the pressure to ensure I came. But why? Just for revenge about his father. Kalen's laugh was bitter. You still don't understand. The documents grandfather hid, they're not just evidence of trafficking. They're proof that Viktor Volkov murdered the original land surveyor and forged the mineral rights claims. Every fortune the Volkov family built came from stolen land. If those papers surface, Marcus loses everything. His entire empire crumbles. Then we get backup. The FBI. In 5 minutes, she shook her head. Besides, the mine is a maze. 47 tunnels, 12 levels. Half of them flooded or collapsed. Without the old knowledge, without knowing grandfather's markers, anyone going in will die. The mountain made sure of that. She stood, but Daniel grabbed her wrist. There has to be another way. Kalen looked at him with something like pity. You still think like a cop, like there are rules. She pulled free. Watch. She made a low whistle, barely audible. Zephyr's ears perked up. She made a series of hand signals, and the massive wolf melted into the underbrush, moving toward the compound's eastern perimeter. For 30 seconds. Nothing happened. Then a scream. One of the guards on the eastern side was down. Zephyr's jaws clamped on his gun arm. The wolf had appeared from nowhere, struck in absolute silence, and vanished before anyone could react, leaving the guard writhing in the snow. Contact east, someone shouted. Guards scrambled toward the screaming man. That's when Kalen whistled again, different pitch. The wolf pack struck from 3 directions at once, not killing, but harrying, biting legs, dragging weapons away, causing chaos without giving clear targets. Open fire! Volkov's voice screamed through the speakers. The guards fired wildly into the forest. Automatic weapons chattered, muzzle flashes strobing, trees splintered. Snow exploded in geysers. But the wolves were already gone, fading back into the forest like smoke. Then Daniel heard a sound that made his soul freeze. A high, keening cry. Not human. A wolf's death howl. Kalen's entire body went rigid. No! A gray form stumbled from the tree line, a younger wolf, smaller than Zephyr. Blood streamed from its side, staining the snow crimson. It took 3 more steps before collapsing. Kalen was moving before Daniel could stop her, racing across open ground toward the fallen wolf. Guards swung their weapons toward her. Hold fire, Volkov commanded. I need her alive. She dropped to her knees beside the wolf, barely more than a pup. Daniel could see now it was female, with a white mark on her forehead like a star. Luna, Kalen whispered, cradling the wolf's head. My little moon, I raised you from birth. The wolf's breathing was labored, blood bubbling from her mouth. She looked at Kalen with those amber eyes, still trusting despite the pain. Then, with a final shudder, she went still. Kalen's scream wasn't human. It was primal, raw, torn from somewhere deeper than grief. The sound echoed off the mountains, seeming to go on forever, and the mountain answered. The temperature plummeted so fast Daniel's next breath came out as steam. 20 degrees in 5 seconds. The guards looked around nervously as ice began forming on their weapons. Every tree in sight began to creak and groan. though there was no wind. Snow slid from branches in perfect synchronization, like the forest was shaking off sleep. The ground itself seemed to vibrate with a frequency Daniel felt in his bones. "What's happening?" one guard shouted. Kaylin stood slowly, still holding Luna's body. When she turned toward the compound, her eyes had changed, still green, but now they held flecks of gold like zephyrs, like the Pack's. "You killed one of mine," she said, her voice carrying despite the distance. "The mountain has laws older than your weapons. Mr. Volkov, you just broke the highest one." She laid Luna gently in the snow, closed the wolf's eyes with trembling fingers. Then she pulled something from her pouch, a handful of seeds, which she scattered over the body. Within seconds, green shoots pushed through the snow, vines erupted from the frozen ground, wrapping around Luna's form. Flowers bloomed in the dead of winter white petals that glowed faintly in the harsh floodlights. "Impossible," Daniel breathed. Kaylin walked toward the compound's gate, and the guards actually stepped back. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Ice began forming on the razor wire, making it brittle as glass. "I'm coming in, Volkov," she called out. "Alone, as you demanded. But understand this, you've awakened something that should have stayed sleeping." She reached the gate and placed her hand on the frozen metal. It shattered at her touch, falling away like sugar glass. Behind her, the forest had gone completely silent. Not even the wind moved. But Daniel could feel it, something massive stirring in the deeper woods. Something ancient, something angry. The mountain itself was waking up. Hour 79, the darkest hour. Kaylin walked through the shattered gate like a queen entering her execution. The guards formed a circle around her, rifles trained on her head, but she didn't flinch. Their breath came in white clouds in the supernatural cold that followed her. "Search her," Volkov's voice commanded through the speakers. Rough hands patted her down, removing her grandfather's pouch, the bone whistle, a knife made from volcanic glass. One guard tried to grab her necklace, a small wooden wolf carved by her grandfather, but jerked back with a cry. His palm bore a burn mark in the perfect shape of the pendant. "Leave it," Volkov said, irritation creeping into his voice. "Bring her to the mine entrance." Daniel watched from the tree line, every muscle screaming to intervene. Zephyr stood beside him, trembling with barely contained rage. The massive wolf's amber eyes tracked Kaylin's every step, a continuous growl rumbling from his chest like distant thunder. The guards marched Kaylin to the fortified mine entrance where Marcus Volkov finally showed himself, tall, scarred, wearing an expensive suit incongruously paired with military boots. His left eye was milky white, a souvenir from a past encounter Daniel had heard about but never believed. "The famous Kaylin Windwalker," Volkov said, circling her slowly. "You look just like your grandfather. Same defiant eyes, same foolish nobility." "Where's the boy?" Kaylin's voice was steady. "Safe. For now." Volkov pulled out a tablet, showed her a video feed. Josh sat in what looked like an old mining cart, deep in the tunnel system. Water dripped steadily nearby, and Daniel's heart clenched seeing his son's pale face, the exhaustion in his small frame. "Level 3, shaft 7, or is it shaft 9? These old tunnels all look the same. Let him go first. Then I'll guide you." Volkov backhanded her casually, the crack echoing across the snow. Kaylin's head snapped sideways, blood trickling from her split lip, but she didn't fall. From the forest came a sound that made every guard raise their weapon, Zephyr's war howl, joined immediately by dozens of others. The pack was close, circling the compound like a noose. "Tell your pets to back off," Volkov said, pressing a pistol to Kaylin's temple. "Or I paint the snow with your brains." Kaylin raised her hand slowly, made a subtle gesture. The howling stopped instantly, but Daniel could still see eyes glowing between the trees, hundreds of them now. "Good girl," Volkov sneered. "Now, inside. Time to find what your grandfather stole from my family." Yeah, they disappeared into the mine entrance. Daniel started forward, but found his path blocked. The scarred female wolf from earlier stood directly in front of him, joined by 6 others. When he tried to go around, they moved to block him again. "I have to help her," Daniel pleaded with the animals. The scarred female, clearly Zephyr's mother, looked at him with those ancient amber eyes and deliberately sat down. The message was clear. Kalen had commanded them to keep him here. A speaker near Daniel crackled to life. Volkov had left the channel open, wanting him to hear everything. The first marker. Miss Windwalker? Where is it? Third support beam. Look for the carved raven. Footsteps echoed through the speaker, along with dripping water and the occasional groan of old timber. Found it. It points left. Move. They went deeper. Daniel could track their progress by Kalen's directions each turn. Each landmark referenced some piece of knowledge passed down through generations. The crying wall where water seeped rust red. The echo chamber where 3 tunnels met. The bone box where miners had died in a collapse decades ago. 20 minutes in, Josh's voice came through, weak but clear. Kalen, is that you? Stay calm, Josh, she replied. I'm coming. I tried to find the papers myself. I remembered the patterns from the festival, but... Shh. You did perfectly. Your markers helped me find the way. Daniel's eyes burned. His 8-year-old son, trying to be a hero in that nightmare maze. How touching, Volkov said. The 7th level now. Where's the next marker? A pause. Then Kalen's voice. Different somehow. There's no marker here. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. This is where grandfather stopped marking. This is where it gets dangerous. Dangerous how? The mountain's heart beats strongest here. The old barriers are thinnest. If you're not Windwalker blood, if you don't know the words, a sharp slap, Kalen's cry of pain, then Volkov, enough mysticism, guide us or I start breaking your fingers. The words won't work if I'm forced to speak them, Kalen said through what sounded like gritted teeth. The mountain knows intention. It knows fear from respect, greed from need. Then I'll make you need it, Volkov said coldly. What came next made Daniel fall to his knees. Kalen's screams echoed through the speakers, not just pain, but something deeper, like her soul itself was being torn. The sound of electricity crackling, the smell of burning flesh somehow carried through the audio. Zephyr went completely mad. The giant wolf threw himself against the wall of his mother's pack, trying to get through, but they held firm. His howls of anguish matched Kalen's screams, creating a harmony of suffering that made the guards above ground look around nervously. Stop, Daniel shouted at the speakers. Stop, you bastard. I'll give you anything. Volkov's laugh echoed from the mine. I don't need anything from you, officer. Your part was just to ensure she came. Though I admit, your son was an unexpected bonus. Such a clever boy. Learning the old signs. Perhaps I'll keep him. Raise him properly. Make him forget his father the way she forgot hers was weak. Another scream from Kalen. Then, gasping, the chamber. It's behind the wall that looks like a face. You have to sing the morning song to open it. Sing it. Kalen's voice rose in a haunting melody, words in a language older than English, older than memory. The speakers distorted with the sound, as if the equipment couldn't properly process what she was singing. Then, a grinding noise, stone moving against stone. My God, one of Volkov's men breathed. It actually opened. Get the documents, Volkov ordered. All of them, rustling papers. Then Volkov's triumphant laugh. 20 years my father searched for these, the land deeds, the mineral rights, the evidence of every crime, and this, paper crackling, the real prize, the original treaty, never legally dissolved. This land belongs to no one but the Windwalkers. Now you have them, Kalen said weakly. Let the boy go. Oh, Miss Windwalker, you didn't really think I'd let any of you leave. You know too much. The boy saw too much. His father, well, he's just loose ends. You gave your word? I lied. Men, prepare the charges. We'll seal this mine forever. 3 bodies inside. Tragic accident. No one will question it. The mountain won't let you. Another slap. Your mountain is rock and dirt. My men are real. And in 5 minutes, you'll all be buried under 1,000 tons of stone." Daniel heard footsteps running, moving away from the microphone. Then Kalen's broken whisper, "Josh, Josh, can you hear me?" "I'm scared," came the small voice. "I know, but remember what I taught you at the festival about how wolves say goodbye. 3 howls for the sunset. That's right. Can you howl for me, just like I showed you?" A child's attempt at a wolf howl echoed through the mine. Then a gunshot. Kalen's scream of no was cut off by the speakers going completely dead. Hour 80. Nature's vengeance. The gunshot's echo hadn't even faded when the mountain responded. Daniel felt at first a vibration deep in the earth, like a massive heart beginning to beat. Snow slid from trees in perfect sheets. The frozen ground cracked in spiderweb patterns radiating out from the mine entrance. But this wasn't random geological activity. This was deliberate, controlled, ancient. Zephyr broke free from his mother's pack with strength that shouldn't exist in any earthly creature. He moved like liquid mercury, a gray blur that the other wolves didn't even try to stop this time. They understood the ancient law had been broken. Blood had been spilled in the sacred depths. Daniel ran after him, his human legs pathetically slow compared to the wolf's supernatural speed. Behind him, he heard the guards shouting in confusion as their equipment began failing, radios producing only static, night vision goggles sparking and dying, even their weapons jamming inexplicably. The mine entrance loomed ahead. Daniel plunged into the darkness, following the sound of Zephyr's snarl echoing off stone walls. Emergency lights flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that seemed alive. The temperature inside was even colder than outside, his breath forming ice crystals that fell like tiny diamonds. 7 levels down, following the trail of Volkov's hasty retreat. Daniel found them. The scene froze his blood. Kalen lay crumpled against the tunnel wall, blood spreading from her shoulder shot, but breathing. Josh was tied to a mining cart 20 feet away, his face white with terror but apparently unharmed. The gunshot had been fired into the ceiling as a threat, not at his son. Between them stood Marcus Volkov, holding the stolen documents in one hand and a pistol in the other, laughing with the confidence of a man who thought he'd won. "Did you really think your wolf would save you?" Volkov said to Kalen's barely conscious form. "These are modern times, girl. Superstition dies with—" He never finished the sentence. Kalen's bloody hand uncurled, revealing what she'd truly found in the hidden chamber, not documents, but something infinitely more powerful, a stone the size of a robin's egg, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe, her grandfather's final insurance policy. She pressed it against the mine floor and spoke a single word in the old language. The stone shattered. The sound it produced was beyond human hearing, but Daniel felt it in his bones, his teeth, his soul, an ultrasonic frequency that rolled out in waves, passing through rock and earth and snow like they were nothing. For 3 heartbeats, silence. Then the mountain answered with 1,000 voices. The howling started distant but came closer with impossible speed. Not dozens of wolves, hundreds, every pack within 50 miles responding to a call that hadn't been sounded in a generation. But it wasn't just wolves. Daniel heard deeper sounds, the roar of bears that should have been hibernating, awakened by the ancient summons, the screech of eagles and hawks, the chittering of smaller predators. Every carnivore in the mountain range converging on this single point. Volkov's men above ground started screaming. Through the mine entrance, Daniel could see them running, abandoning their posts, throwing down their weapons. But there was nowhere to run. The forest itself had become a wall of eyes and teeth. "This isn't possible," Volkov stammered, his arrogance crumbling as the howling grew louder. "My grandfather tried to tell your father," Kalen whispered, struggling to sit up. "The mountain isn't just rock. It's alive. It remembers. And it judges." The mine supports began to groan, not from age or weight, but from something growing. Daniel watched in awe as roots burst through solid rock, thick as his arm and moving with purpose. They wrapped around support beams, through equipment, creating a living cage that blocked every exit, except the way they'd come. You broke the oldest law, Kaelin continued, her voice stronger now. You spilled innocent blood in the sacred places. The mountain demands justice. Volkov raised his pistol toward Josh. I'll kill the boy. I'll kill you all. That's when Zephyr struck. The wolf moved faster than thought, faster than reflex. One moment he was in the shadows, the next his jaws were clamped on Volkov's gun hand. The sound of bones breaking was surgical, precise, not the savage mauling of a wild animal, but the calculated strike of an executioner. Volkov's scream echoed off the walls as the gun clattered away. His hand was still attached but mangled beyond use, fingers bent at impossible angles. Zephyr released him and stepped back, blood dripping from his muzzle. Amber eyes holding an intelligence that was definitely not animal. Daniel rushed to Josh, cutting his bonds with shaking hands. His son collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Dad, I was so scared. I know, buddy, I know. You're safe now. Volkov crawled backward, cradling his destroyed hand, leaving a trail of blood on the stone floor. Please, he whimpered. All his cruelty evaporated. Please, I have money. I can pay anything. Just call them off. Outside, the first of the pack had reached the mine entrance. Daniel could see their shapes, not just wolves, but bears, mountain cats, even a massive elk with antlers like ancient weapons. They didn't enter. They waited. Kaelin stood slowly, one hand pressed to her wounded shoulder. She walked to Volkov with the dignity of a judge approaching the condemned. The forest will decide your fate, she said quietly. Run. What? Run deeper into the mine. Find another exit if you can, or stay here and face them. She gestured to the gathering predators. Choose. Volkov looked at the wall of eyes reflecting in the tunnel entrance, then at the darkness stretching deeper into the mountain. He made his choice, scrambling to his feet and running into the black depths. His expensive suit torn, his proud face twisted with terror. He made it maybe 100 yards before the rumbling started. The tunnel ahead of him began to collapse, not randomly but with precision. The ceiling fell in sections, creating a barrier but not crushing him. The mountain was sealing him in, giving him exactly what his greed had always sought: permanent ownership of a piece of the mine, trapped forever with his stolen fortune. His screams echoed up from the depths, growing fainter as more sections collapsed, until finally there was only silence. Is he dead? Daniel asked. No, Kaelin said with certainty. There's water down there, air pockets. He'll live for weeks, maybe months, alone with his guilt in the darkness. The mountain's justice isn't always death. Sometimes it's worse. She swayed on her feet, and Daniel caught her before she fell. We need to get you to a hospital, he said. No hospitals, she managed. The pack. They know how to heal their own. Josh tugged on Daniel's coat. Dad, look. At the mine entrance, the predators were parting like a sea. Walking through them came the ancient white bear from before, and on its back, impossible but undeniable, rode an old indigenous woman Daniel recognized from town, Martha Crow Feather, who ran the Heritage Center. Martha, Daniel gasped. How did you? The old woman smiled, dismounting from the bear with surprising agility. Did you think Kaelin was the last one with the old knowledge? Officer Hayes? Her grandfather was my brother. And she moved to Kaelin, examining the wound with practiced hands. The bullet passed through, clean. You'll heal. Child. Aunt Martha, Kaelin whispered. I thought you'd forgotten the ways. I had to appear to forget, to stay hidden, to wait. She pulled herbs from her bag, pressing them to the wound. But when the stone was broken, when the call went out, I remembered everything. The mine began to rumble again, more sections collapsing deeper in the mountain. Martha looked up sharply. We need to leave. Now. The mountain is sealing this place forever, and it won't wait much longer. They moved toward the entrance, Daniel carrying Kaelin while Josh held tight to his other hand. Zephyr walked beside them, and the gathered predators parted respectfully. Just as they reached daylight, Daniel heard something that made his blood freeze, a faint cry from deep in the collapsing mine. "Wait," another voice called from the darkness. "Please, help me." It wasn't Volkov. Someone else was down there. Hour 80 continued. The voice from the darkness belonged to Tommy Mills, Sergeant Mills' 18-year-old son, one of Volkov's guards who'd been forced into service when his father's gambling debts came due. They pulled him from the collapsing entrance just as the mountain sealed itself completely. The boy sobbing apologies, explaining how Volkov had threatened his family. The mountain, it seemed, knew the difference between evil and the enslaved. Hour 144, 6 days later. Mountain's Edge. Hospital. Kaylin lay propped in the hospital bed, her shoulder bandaged but healing remarkably fast. Josh hadn't left her side except when forced, his small hand constantly holding hers as he drew wolf after wolf in his sketchbook. "This one's Zephyr," he explained, showing her his latest drawing. "And this is Luna, in the flowers you made. She's running in heaven now, right? She runs with the eternal pack," Kaylin said softly. "Forever young, forever free." The room was full of flowers, not from the gift shop, but from the forest itself. The indigenous community had been coming in a steady stream, bringing traditional medicines, singing the old songs of healing. Children pressed their faces to the window, wanting to see the wolf girl who'd become a legend overnight. Daniel entered carrying a box of old leather journals. Behind him, Martha Crowfeather followed with the town council, including the mayor, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "These were in evidence for 10 years, Daniel said, setting the journals on Kaylin's bedside table. "Your grandfather's writings, his maps, his history of the land, they belong to you." Kaylin touched them reverently, tears streaming down her face. "He wrote everything down. Every story, every sign." The mayor cleared his throat. "Miss Windwalker, on behalf of the town council, I want to formally apologize for how we treated your grandfather. And you. Effective immediately. I'm resigning." "That's not necessary." Kaylin started. "It is," he interrupted. "I supported the mining company. I dismissed the old ways as superstition. I was wrong. The town needs leaders who understand that progress doesn't mean forgetting wisdom." Martha stepped forward. "The council has asked me to serve as interim mayor. My first act will be establishing the Windwalker Conservation Trust. This entire mountain range will be protected land, with you and your family as permanent guardians." "I don't have family," Kaylin said quietly. "You do now," Daniel said firmly. "If you'll have us." Josh looked up from his drawing. "Does that mean Kaylin's going to be my big sister?" Kaylin laughed the first time Daniel had heard it, pure and unguarded. "I'd be honored, little wolf." A reporter pushed through the crowd at the door. "Miss Windwalker, CNN, Fox, everyone wants your story. The video of the animals responding to your call has 50 million views. Will you?" "No," Kaylin said simply. "The forest doesn't seek fame. What happened was justice, not entertainment." The reporter persisted. "But people are calling it a miracle. The president wants to meet you." Zephyr, who'd been lying quietly in the corner the hospital had given up trying to keep him out, stood and stared at the reporter. The man backed away quickly. "I think that means the interview is over," Martha said dryly. Sunset, crying stone. The sacred grove was peaceful in the dying light. Kaylin stood steadily now, though Daniel kept a protective hand near her elbow. Josh ran ahead, placing wildflowers on the small mound where Luna was buried, now covered in impossibly green grass despite the winter cold. The pack was there, not just Zephyr's family, but others too. Word had spread through whatever mysterious network wolves used. Kaylin was pack mother now, protector of the ancient law. "Your son has the gift," Martha said quietly to Daniel. "He learned the signs faster than anyone I've taught. The mountain has chosen him. Daniel watched Josh kneel beside a young wolf, the two studying each other with mutual fascination. Will you teach him? Kaylin will, Martha replied. She's the bridge between worlds now, the one who'll help others understand that technology and tradition can coexist. Kaylin approached the crying stone, placed her hand on its wet surface. Grandfather, your prophecy came true. When humans fail you, nature protects you, but it became more. When humans learn humility, nature accepts them home. Josh ran over, grabbing both Kaylin and Daniel's hands. Look, the sunset. They stood together, man, woman, child, and wolf, as the sun painted the mountains gold. The pack howled their evening song, and Josh joined them, his young voice blending perfectly with the ancient chorus. The mountain had remembered, the debt was paid, and a new pack was born. 1 month later, Mountain's Edge Community Center. The truth about the Volkov Empire made national headlines. The documents Kaylin recovered revealed 40 years of corruption, murdered surveyors, forged land deeds, poisoned water supplies blamed on natural contamination, and 12 indigenous families who'd disappeared trying to protect their sacred sites. Marcus Volkov's father had built a criminal dynasty on blood and lies, protected by officials he'd bought with drug money. But the darkest revelation was the list of names prominent citizens, judges, even state senators who'd known the truth and stayed silent for a share of the profits. People who'd attended church with the Windwalkers, who'd watched as Joseph was branded a troublemaker and driven to his death, all while cashing Volkov's checks. Daniel stood before a packed auditorium, addressing the crowd that had come to hear the full story. Beside him, Kaylin sat quietly with Josh on her lap, Zephyr at her feet. Martha Crowfeather watched from the elder's chair, her presence a reminder that the old ways had survived despite everything. The real crime wasn't just Volkov's, Daniel said to the hushed audience. It was the silence, the looking away, the choosing of comfort over conscience. Every person who knew something was wrong but said nothing, they were accomplices. A man in the crowd stood up, Mr. Patterson, the bank manager. I knew, he admitted, his voice shaking. I processed suspicious transactions for years. I was afraid for my family. But that's no excuse. I failed this community. One by one, others stood. Confessions poured out. The weight of collective guilt filled the room like smoke. Young Josh tugged on Kaylin's sleeve and whispered something. She nodded and stood, her voice carrying despite its softness. The mountain teaches us that secrets buried in darkness will always claw their way to light. My grandfather died because he wouldn't let the truth stay buried. But he also taught me this: redemption begins with confession, and healing begins with truth. She looked directly at the audience. How many of you would have risked everything, your career, your family's safety, your life, to expose a truth this dangerous? How many would have stood with my grandfather instead of turning away? How many would stand today if another Volkov rose tomorrow? The room fell silent. The question hung in the air, challenging every person present. Daniel took the microphone again. We're establishing the Windwalker Foundation not just for conservation, but for protection of whistleblowers, for those brave enough to speak truth to power. Because Kaylin's right. Another Volkov will rise. Another secret will threaten innocent lives. The question is, will you be brave enough to howl when the wolves are silent? Will you stand when standing costs everything? Mrs. Chen, elderly owner of the general store, raised her trembling hand. I wasn't brave before, but I will be now. I pledge $50,000 to the foundation. Others followed. Not just money, but promises to watch, to speak, to never again choose comfortable silence over dangerous truth. As the meeting ended and people filed out into the snowy evening, many stopped to touch Zephyr's fur, gently, a blessing, a promise, a connection to something older than fear. Kaylin stood at the window, watching the town lights flicker below. They want to be better, she said to Daniel. But wanting and doing are different things. What do you think? Daniel asked. Will they stand next time? She smiled sadly. Some will. That's more than before. Change comes slowly, like spring after a hard winter. But it comes. Josh pressed his small hand against the window, leaving a print in the condensation. "I'll stand," he said firmly, "even if I'm scared, because that's what the pack does. We protect each other." Zephyr rose and howled long, low, and mournful, not a call to hunt, but a reminder. The mountain remembers everything, every kindness, every cruelty, every choice to speak or stay silent. Every single one of us faces moments when we must choose between comfortable lies and dangerous truths. The question echoes still. When your moment comes, will you have the courage to break the silence? Will you risk everything to drag dark secrets into the light, or will you, like so many before, choose the safety of silence while innocents suffer in the shadows? The mountain is watching. The mountain remembers. What will it remember about you?